Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sujivam. It's really loud. Sadvaitam Savadutam Prajana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sujivam. Sorry. Savadutam Prajana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Langayate Gadim Yat Kripa Tadaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam. Okay, this is chapter 18, text 60. Swabhava Jaina Kunteya Nibadha Svena Karmana Kartum Nichasyan Mohat Karisyasya Vashopitat. Under illusion, you are now declining to act according to my direction, but compelled by your own nature, you will act all the same, O son of Kunti. Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hridashirjuna Tishtati Brahmayan Sarvabhutani Yantrarudani Mayaya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities, who are seated as on a machine made of material energy. Tameva sharanam gacha sarva bhavena bhadata tat prasadat param shantim stanam prapsyasi sat shashvatam. O sign of Bharata, surrender unto him utterly. By his grace you will attain transcendental peace and the supreme and eternal abode. Okay, so from 70. This is 71. Shadavan anasuyascha shrinudyad apiyo naraha sopi mukta subalokan prapnuyat punya karmanam. And one who listens with faith and without envy becomes free from sinful reaction and attains to the planets where the pious dwell. Kachidetak shrutam parta Tvayakagrena chetasa kachid angyana samoha pranarshtaste dhananjaya. O conqueror of wealth, Arjuna, have you heard this attentively with your mind? Are your illusions and ignorance now dispelled? Arjuna uvacha nashto moha smritir labda tvat prasadan mayachuta stitosmi gatasne dehaha karishye Vachanam tava. Arjuna said, My dear Krishna, O infallible one, my illusion is now gone. I have regained my memory by your mercy, and I am now firm and free from doubt, and am prepared to act according to your instructions. Sanjaya uvacha ityaham vasudevasya partasya cha mahatmanaha samvadam imam ashrosham Adbhutam Romaharshanam. Sanjaya said, Thus I have heard the conversation of two great souls, Krishna and Arjuna, and so wonderful is that message that my hair is standing on end. Vyasa prasadak trutavan etad guyam aham param yogam yogeshwarat krishnat sakshat katayata swayam. By the mercy of Vyas, I have heard these most confidential talks directly from the master of all mysticism, Krishna, who is speaking personally to Arjuna. Rajan samsmritya samsmritya samvadam imam adbhutam keshavarjunayo punyam hrishyami cha mahurmuhu. O king, as I repeatedly recall this wondrous and holy dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna, I take pleasure, being thrilled at every moment. Takcha samsmritya samsmritya rupam atyadbhutam harehe vishmayo me mahan rajan hrishyami cha punah punaha. O king, when I remember the wonderful form of Lord Krishna, I am struck with even greater wonder, and I rejoice again and again. Yatra Yogeshvara Krishno Yatra Partho Dhanurdaraha Tatra Shrir Vijayo Bhutir Dhruva Nitir Matir Mama. Wherever there is Krishna, the master of all mystics, and wherever there is Arjuna, the supreme archer, there will also certainly be opulence, victory, extraordinary power, and morality. That is my opinion. Wow. Okay, so 2 texts now in chapter 3 texts from chapter 1. Dhritarashtra uvacha dharmakshetre kurukshetre samaveta yuyutsavaha mamaka pandavaschaiva kim akurvata Sanjaya. Dhritarashtra said, O Sanjaya, after assembling in the place of pilgrimage at Kurukshetra, what did my sons and the sons of Pandu do, being desirous to fight? Sanjaya uvacha drishtva tu pandavanikam vyudam durodanastada acharyam upasangamya rajavachanam abravit. Sanjaya said, O king, after looking over the army gathered by the sons of Pandu, King Duryodhana went to his teacher and began to speak the following words. Pashyaitam panduputranam acharya mahatim chamum vyudam drupada putrena tava shishena dimata. O my teacher, behold the great army of the sons of Pandu, so expertly arranged by your intelligent disciple, the son of Drupad. Okay, so back to text 71, chapter 18. And one who listens with faith and without envy becomes free from sinful reaction and attains to the planets where the pious dwell. Purport: by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In the 67th verse of this chapter, the Lord explicitly forbade the Gitas being spoken to those who are envious of the Lord. Here's what verse 67 says. This confidential knowledge may not be explained to those who are not austere or devoted or engaged in devotional service, nor to one who is envious of me. In other words, Bhagavad Gita is for the devotees only, but it so happens that sometimes a devotee of the Lord will hold open class, and in that class, all the students are not expected to be devotees. Why do such persons hold open class? It is to be explained here that although everyone is not a devotee, still there are many men who are not envious of Krishna. They have faith in Him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If such persons hear from a bona fide devotee about the Lord, the result is that they become at once free from all sinful reactions, and after that attain to the planetary system where all righteous persons are situated. Therefore, simply by hearing Bhagavad Gita, even a person who does not try to be a pure devotee attains the highest result of righteous activities. Attains the result of righteous activities. Thus, a pure devotee of the Lord gives everyone a chance to become free from all sinful reactions and to become a devotee of the Lord. Generally, those who are free from sinful reaction are righteous. Such persons very easily take to Krishna consciousness. The word punya karmanam is very significant here. This refers to the performance of great sacrifice. Those who are righteous in performing devotional service, but who are not pure, can attain the planetary system of the pole star or Dhruvaloka, where Dhruva Maharaj is presiding. He is a great devotee of the Lord, and he has a special planet, which is called the pole star. O conqueror of wealth, Arjuna, have you heard this attentively with your mind? Are your illusions and ignorance now dispelled? Purport. The Lord was acting as the spiritual master of Arjuna. Therefore, it was his duty to inquire from Arjuna whether he understood the whole Bhagavad Gita in its proper perspective. If not, the Lord was ready to re-explain any point, or the whole Bhagavad Gita if so required. Actually, anyone who hears Bhagavad Gita from a bona fide spiritual master, like Krishna or his representative, will find that all his ignorance is dispelled. Bhagavad Gita is not an ordinary book written by a poet or fiction writer. It is spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Any person, if he is fortunate enough to hear these teachings from Krishna or from his bona fide spiritual representative, is sure to become a liberated person and get out of the darkness of ignorance. Arjuna said, My dear Krishna, O infallible one, my illusion is now gone. I have regained my memory by your mercy, and I am now firm and free from doubt and prepared to act according to your instructions. Purport. The constitutional position of a living entity, represented by Arjuna, is that he has to act according to the order of the Supreme Lord. He is meant for self-discipline. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that the actual position of the living entity is that of eternal servant of the Supreme Lord. Forgetting this principle, the living entity becomes conditioned by material nature. But in serving the Supreme Lord, he becomes the liberated servant of God. The living entity's constitutional position is to be servitor. He either has to serve the illusory Maya or the Supreme Lord. So in the material world, everyone is forced to act. And as we hear from Bhagavad Gita, they're not actually the doers of their activities. But all of the activities that the conditioned souls are engaging in are being forced by the modes of nature. So the mode of ignorance kicks in more, and then someone goes to sleep. Or the mode of passion kicks in, and then they go and do some fruitive activity. Or the mode of goodness is there, and they get some knowledge. But all of their activities, they're being impelled to do them by an external force, by the modes of nature. They're in a body, the soul, which is eternal, undying, and primeval, is in the temporary body made of nature. And so those modes of nature push the body along and impel them to act. So all of the activities that are done, they're not the real activities of the person or the soul. They're illusory activities, because they're being done by temporary nature, forcing that person to engage in temporary activities. But for the pure devotees and for Krishna's devotees in the spiritual world, everything there is done by the person, because it's stemming from love of Krishna. So here, when someone acts, it stems from the modes of material nature in this material world. But in the spiritual world, all the activities and the activities of Krishna's pure devotees, they're all, the impetus for them is love of Krishna. So one can either choose to serve Maya or serve Krishna. If one wants to turn away from Krishna and try to be the center of life, that I'm the center, everything in my experience and around me is meant for my sense enjoyment. Everything in existence is an opportunity for me to gratify my senses. If one has that conception, then they stay in the material world where they're forced to act by the modes of nature. But if one comes to the necessary realization, if one comes to reality that actually I'm not the seer, but I'm the seen. I'm not the enjoyer, but I'm the enjoyed. I'm not the master, but I'm the servant of the servants of Krishna. Then they become free from this bondage of the material world. They're no longer forced to act by the modes of material nature, but they can actually act. And that activity comes from the platform of pure love. They love Krishna, and they act in such a way that to please him. So, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur would say that this is his most important teaching, and that if one doesn't understand this, then they don't understand anything that he's taught, and they can't understand him at all, is this concept of drig, drishya, drashta, which means the seer and the seen. So the understanding that just like we can see, we have the sense of sight, and then there's an object that is seen. And so we think, I'm the seer, I'm using the sense of sight, and I'm seeing this object. But actually, Krishna is the seer, and we are the seen. We are the object for his enjoyment. Just like we see so many things, and I can utilize them and try to, use them for something or enjoy them in some way. But we're like that for Krishna. We're the objects of, he can use us. So he's the enjoyer and we're the enjoyed. And he's the seer and we're the seen. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would say, when one comes for darshan in the temple, they don't just say that, I have seen the statue. If that's what somebody thinks, then they never saw Krishna at all. But when someone comes for darshan of the Lord, actually the proper conception is that Krishna, they hope that Krishna will see them and he sees them in their real form. He sees their actual uncovered self. We have so many coverings, false designations, thinking I'm this, I'm that, Hindu, American, white, black, Christian, Muslim. But the soul is an eternal servant of Krishna, so one comes before the Lord to be seen by the Lord. So he's the enjoyer, so everything is meant for his enjoyment. The whole temple runs on his clock. We offer all of the food to him and then eat whatever remnants there are. Everything is set on his schedule. So Krishna is the enjoyer and we're the enjoyed. Shri Shri Gaurnitai Ki Jai. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would say that I want to stand behind the pure devotee of the Lord so that the Lord, who is surely looking at his pure devotee, might happen to see me. So this is the most important part of his teachings, is that Krishna is the enjoyer. And everything that exists is meant for his enjoyment. Every person, every living being, every type of energy, everything's meant for his enjoyment. So when the living entities can hear, when they become fortunate, then they get they hear from a devotee, and that devotee tells them that actually you're not the enjoyer of this world. Hey, haven't you noticed that trying to enjoy here has made you suffer time and time again? And they go, yes. And then the devotee can explain to them that actually you should engage everything in Krishna's service. Instead of trying to enjoy your senses, kama, lust, try to satisfy the senses of Krishna, and that's prema, love. So there's no love in this material world because everyone is trying to satisfy their own selfish desires. Any activity, there's some selfish motive, even if it's for someone else. They say it's for my friend, for my family, for my country. So it's all, again, centered on this illusion that I'm the center and I will do something for me or for my. But the reality is that actually everything is for Krishna. So if we do something for him, then we can come back to our natural position. So there's only two options: to be in illusion, controlled by Maya, controlled by material nature, or to be in our natural constitutional position as a servitor of the Lord. If he serves the Supreme Lord, he is in his normal condition. But if he prefers to serve the illusory external energy, then certainly he will be in bondage. In illusion, the living entity is serving in this material world. He is bound by his lust and desires, yet he thinks of himself as the master of the world. This is called illusion. When a person is liberated, his illusion is over, and he voluntarily surrenders unto the Supreme to act according to his desires. So that means we act for Krishna's satisfaction, not that, okay, now I've heard about Krishna, so he's another object of my enjoyment. Now I've heard about Krishna, so now I can enjoy Krishna. I can use devotional service as a way to get some money or some recognition or some fame or whatever it is. But the point is that someone becomes fortunate, they hear about Krishna, and then they recognize that everything is meant for his enjoyment. But someone like the Prakriti Sahajas, they hear about Krishna, and then they just carry over this material idea that, okay, I've heard about Krishna, but everything is for my enjoyment. So let's see, he does this activity, let me try to imitate that and see if Krishna is enjoying that activity, maybe I can enjoy it too. So then they do all sorts of, in the name of being religious, they become the most sinful people, justifying their sinful activities with, oh, well, God does that, maybe I'll do that. So the devotee actually sees that I am meant to be enjoyed by Krishna, so I should act according to his instructions. But someone who takes devotional service cheaply, like the Prakriti Sahajas, they see that, let me use this idea of religion, devotional service, God, let me use that as a way to facilitate my sense enjoyment. And then they do all sorts of crazy things, as we'll hear in many purports. This is called illusion. When a person is liberated, his illusion is over, and he voluntarily surrenders unto the Supreme to act according to his desires. The last illusion, the last snare of Maya, to trap the living entity, is the proposition that he is God. The living entity thinks that he is no longer a conditioned soul, but God. He is so unintelligent that he does not think that if he were God, then how could he be in doubt? That he does not consider. So that is the last snare of illusion. Actually, to become free from the illusory energy is to understand Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and agree to act according to his order. So that's how we really become free, not to try to falsely claim that we are God, which this is what the Mayavadis do. Out of anger and frustration that nothing has worked out for my enjoyment, so the last step, let me just pretend that I am God, I am the enjoyer. But then they just end up going to hell because they engage in sinful activities without understanding what is right and what is wrong. What is right is to surrender unto Krishna, and what is wrong is to do anything for my personal sense gratification. But then they justify their own sense gratification with the idea of, well, I am God, so everything's for my enjoyment. So it's really foolish. So out of frustration in this last snare of Maya, thinking that they are God, they completely miss out on the opportunity of the human form of life and degrade themselves into lower and lower species. Why? Because the human form of life is meant for understanding that the human form of life gives something that the animals don't have, which is the opportunity to hear properly. So in the human form of life, one can hear about Krishna, one can hear the absolute truth, what is their relationship to the absolute truth, what is the process that they should take up for perfection. So when one takes to this Mayavad philosophy that, okay, I am God, then they miss out on that, on all of that, the whole purpose of life. Because they don't hear what is the absolute truth, they just think that's me. And then they don't know what's the process of serving that absolute truth. There's no idea of serving because they just think I'll serve myself. And then so like this, they lose the chance to perfect the human form of life. And how do they do it? They do it just through all sorts of crazy word jugglery. Like they say, what is that one? That I am that. Tattvam asi. So they like to juggle grammar. But even a child can understand. So all throughout the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, surrender unto me, always think of me, become my devotee. So he's using the word me, aham, over and over again. So even a child can understand when I say me, if I said, okay, so if I told you, think of me, and then you thought of me, that would make sense. But if I said, think of me, and then you immediately start thinking of yourself, what would that be? It'd be insane narcissism. So this is the position of the Mayavadis, is that they're insane narcissists, because Krishna is saying me, think of me, surrender unto me, become my devotee. And they go, okay, they flip it around to say themselves. But even a child is smarter than the Mayavadis, because he understands that there's a difference between the word me and the word you. You can tell a child, point to me, and they'll point. And you can tell them, okay, now point to you, and they'll point to themselves. So it's just through this very childish grammatical jugglery that they try to justify themselves as being God. But we see all over the Vedas it's saying that actually Vasudev, Krishna, he's the supreme person, he's the original. Govinda, he's the oldest, and at the same time he has his ever youthful form, his spiritual form. And another thing that the Mayavadis try to say to justify their idea that they are God or will become God once they leave their body, they say you have a pot, and outside the pot there's the sky all around, and inside the pot is the sky. So when you break the pot, the sky in the pot will merge with the sky all around. And so they use this as a way to say that when you leave the body, you'll merge with God and become God. But what's the problem with this analogy? We're not a pot. Thank you, Krishna Shavana Prabhu. So that's the problem with, the problem with that analogy is that you're not a pot. None of us are pots. No one is crazy enough to identify as a pot these days. They might identify as a gender that they're not, or as a this or that, but no one is saying I'm a pot. They might say they're a pothead, but not a pot. So I'm not a pot. And I've heard, I haven't read it, but I've heard Bhaktivinoda Thakur actually explains this very nicely to help you realize that you're not a pot. He goes through this very silly argument that the Mayavadis make to explain it. So this is the way they try to explain things, is they'll base their whole reality off of some flowery words or some like some analogies and similes. Say, oh, it's, when you see the sun and it's reflected on the water, and when you have the pot, but there's no use to it, there's no practicality. But if we see the way the Vaishnavacharyas take everything, they say, okay, what is the reality based on scripture? And then to help us understand that more, they may give some analogy that actually relates to what's being said. But the Mayavadis do the exact opposite. Instead of trying to make any sense, they say, make up some whole nicely painted analogy and say, so because the water and the sky is like that, then you are God. So it's very foolish, as we can see in so many examples. The word mohaha is very important in this verse. Mohaha refers to that which is opposed to knowledge. Actually, real knowledge is the understanding that every living being is eternally servitor of the Lord. But instead of thinking oneself in that position, the living entity thinks that he is not servant, that he is the master of this material world, for he wants to lord it over the material nature. That is his illusion. This illusion can be overcome by the mercy of the Lord or by the mercy of a pure devotee. And also the Mayavadis are so foolish that they say, I don't remember the whole thing, but they say, you forgot that you're God because you have to get knowledge, jnana. And then, but their whole idea is that you have to remove everything to uncover that you're God. So at some point you even have to remove, this knowledge, and then the false ego and all of that. I don't remember the whole setup, but here was the point, is that they said, and in this last step, in order to remove the the false ego, it was either knowledge or the false ego. I don't know, it doesn't really matter. But they said in the last step, in order to remove this last thing, whether it's your knowledge or your false ego or something, how do you do that? Because they've got a process for getting rid of all these other things. And then they say, well, how do you remove the false ego at the end of it all to then realize that you are God? Any idea? They say you need the mercy of Brahman. So if something is not a person and is formless and all, how is it going to have feeling? When do we ever see something that doesn't have feeling or form or personality showing mercy to anything else? Like I never see a stone on the street being very merciful to somebody, or a stick. You know, people use a stick, the person can use the stick to walk, and then okay, it's being very helpful. But the stick just by itself on the street without any person involved, it's never merciful. So the whole thing is flawed. They say you need the mercy of this, so something that they're saying is inanimate and not a person. But we see, what does one actually need? They need the mercy of Krishna to get out of this illusion. So one should always speak the absolute truth and should surrender to the absolute truth at all times and see things in their absolute reality. And how do we do that? By submission to that absolute truth, which is Krishna. Because we need His mercy to actually come to the proper understanding that, okay, I'm eternally His servant, so everything I do should be for His satisfaction and His enjoyment. For that, we need His mercy. This illusion can be overcome by the mercy of the Lord or by the mercy of a pure devotee. When that illusion is over, one agrees to act in Krishna consciousness. I remember someone in the temple asked about this a few weeks ago. They were saying, I keep hearing that we need to get the mercy, but I thought you guys weren't about like getting things and getting some material gain and stuff like this, some result. So the devotees, they're not looking by saying we need Krishna's mercy. We're not saying we need His mercy in the form of a Mercedes or some money or something. That stuff might be there, and that's Krishna's energy, which is only meant for His enjoyment, so we can use it in His service if it's needed. But when the devotee is saying, I need Krishna's mercy, we need His mercy to actually serve Him. Like we're begging for His mercy when we're chanting Hare Krishna. And what is that begging? What is that chanting? We're saying, oh, Supreme Lord, oh, energy of the Lord, please engage me in your service. So somehow or other, those of us who are here and who are hearing, we've become fortunate, somehow or other. We've become fortunate, and what is that fortune? What is that mercy that we've gotten? It's that we're being engaged in Krishna's service, either by hearing about Him or cooking for Him in the temple or serving His devotees somehow. So that's what the temple is for, serving Hari, Guru, and Vaishnavas, and we get engaged in that devotional service by the great mercy of Lord Chaitanya, who is Krishna Himself. Okay, there's only 2 more minutes, so are there any questions or comments or corrections?
In the purport to text 71, when Prabhupada's talking about how Krishna forbade that this message be preached to the envious, he says that the devotees still hold classes. And then he says that why do they do this? Not everyone is a devotee, but still there are some men who, although they're not devotees, they're non-envious of Krishna. So I was just wondering how that's possible, that somebody who's not a devotee could be non-envious of Krishna. Even if they're not like a demon who's like Kangsa, who's like consciously envious, and aggressive, an aggressor towards Krishna, like atheistic like that, still, wouldn't he be still he's subtle. He's envious because he's still trying to enjoy the material world, you know. And so how is Prabhupada saying this, or what? I just don't. Doesn't make sense to me. So could you explain it?
Yeah. Well, from the beginning, we know everyone is constitutionally a devotee of the Lord. They're constitutionally enjoyed by Krishna as his part and parcel. But when they come into illusion and come to this material world and think that they can be the enjoyer, then, okay, and now, okay, if it's our job to try to help people come back to Krishna, now we have to make the distinctions. So those distinctions are there in the nectar of instruction, that there's those persons in the world who, there's the envious, the ignorant, and also like innocent. Well, not really innocent because you're trying to enjoy Krishna's property, but the envious and the ignorant, and then the devotees. So it explains that we relate to a preacher, so someone who's on the topmost level, who's an Uttama Adhikari, which cannot be imitated, otherwise someone won't progress and they'll fall down. But the Uttama Adhikari from that topmost position, who sees that everyone's a devotee, in order to preach, they actually have to come down to the Madhyama Adhikari level and make those distinctions to try to help people come up. So he sees that there's those three people. So the envious, he neglects. He just completely avoids, otherwise it just causes more of a problem. They get angrier, make offenses, and they'll bother you also. And then the ignorant people, yeah, they haven't engaged in devotional service yet, but they're not envious. And that non-envy is like characterized by when you speak of God and Krishna and give them advice, they don't become angry. A foolish person, if you give him good advice, he'll get more angry. But someone who's just ignorant, they don't know what is Krishna, what's the purpose of the human form of life, like a child. If they hear of Krishna, they won't become angry, but they'll just accept it. Oh, this person's given me something nice. And they're not a devotee because they're not yet engaging in any devotional service. They're just impelled by the modes of nature, Mode of ignorance says do this, passion says do that. But a devotee can come along and speak to them. So, does that clear it up? Okay. Yeah, thanks. Magadari Prabhu? Is there any way to still do it, or?
I muted that person. He's a Krishna.
Okay, so we've noticed that there might have been a comment from Maharaj upstairs. So if there is, I think we're ready to hear now. I think we have the setup ready. If that's possible. Okay. All right, we can end the class. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila